First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, Ba'Shem Rakal Kadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who are teaching this truth, and shout out to Yakim that's out there in four quarters of the earth proclaiming this truth. As you know, Esau did what he does best, fuck with the video feed, so I'm going to just get into this. As Chad Boaksem, who does most of the videos now for AM TV, Chris Green gets on there once in a while, but either way, part of the alternative media source, they're telling us that there's a secret plot to go after the Russian military, you know, and that, well, you know, yeah, everything about Esau is deceitful, so yeah, that wouldn't be the least bit surprising, you know, because of course, make no mistake about it, the elite do have a plan for Russia and America to go to war, and it's the depopulation goal for Agenda 2030, so let's just go ahead and tune in here.
Obviously, the mainstream media is saying that the world is ending because Donald Trump had a normal meeting with Vladimir Putin. He had a meeting. Right, so the world is absolutely ending, it's treasonous, he should be impeached and removed right away. Now, it's great to be back with you guys today. Leave your comments and opinions in this chat box, and I'll go to some questions or some shout-outs later. And let me dissect the hysteria just a little bit. And I want to discuss something regarding this whole Russian collusion narrative where now these Russian military officials were targeted by the deep state. So the deep state targeted these Russian military officials right before Donald Trump was going to meet with Putin. I'm going to get to that in a second, but let's start with something a little bit more on the lighter side. Alex, could you cue up this video? It's when Christopher Wallace was sitting with Vladimir Putin and discussing the Mueller indictment regarding these 12 military officials charged with hacking the U.S. election. So I'm going to let this play for 1 second here.
And there was no Russian collusion.
And 74-455, they say, you smile, let me finish. They say that these units were specifically involved in hacking into Democratic Party computers, stealing information, and spreading it to the world to try to disrupt the American election. May I give this to you to look at, sir? Here?
No, you could stop it there. Okay, so that is like the funniest thing I've ever seen. So you have Wallace trying to hand him the papers. He's like, what do you want me to do with this? He says, put this over here. What do you want me to do with this? You know, he knows it's all BS. I mean, obviously, look, I'm not going to get into all the details on how, you know, the U.S. infiltrates all these elections. The U.S. infiltrates not just influencing other elections publicly, okay, but going much, much worse. But, you know, you find it interesting. So you have the mainstream media, this deep state media, handing Vladimir Putin these indictments. And let's talk about these indictments for a second here. The Russians, in February 18th, Rob Mueller announced, and Alex, you have this article, the New York Times article right there. This is a February 18th article saying that the Justice Department charged 13 Russians and 3 companies on Friday in a sprawling indictment that unveiled a sophisticated network designed to subvert the 2016 election and to support the Trump campaign. It stretched from an office in St. Petersburg, Russia, and to the social feeds of Americans and ultimately reached the streets of election battleground states. Trolls in Russia. This was the report. Trolls in Russia. Subsequently, let's move a little forward here. You have Donald Trump. Oh, what's happening? The economy's getting better. You have him sitting down with Kim Jong-un. Now we have this summit coming up. So right before Donald Trump is to meet with Vladimir Putin, our Justice Department and Rob Mueller say that a dozen Russian military officials hacked the DNC. And this is all over the media. You can find it anywhere. Okay, a dozen military intelligence officers were indicted Friday on charges that they hacked Democrats' computers, stole their data, and published those files to disrupt the 2016 election. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. I thought 13 Russian trolls. Where are we? Are we just making up charges as we go? That's what it smells like to me, because I thought 13 Russian trolls are the ones who did this. Now, a dozen Russian military intelligence officers were indicted Friday on charges that they hacked Democrats' computers stole their data and published those files to disrupt the 2016 election. The clearest connection to the Kremlin established so far by Special Counsel Robert Mueller. And that's how you know, that name right there, that's how you know it's all BS. This is nothing but a silent coup against the Trump administration. This is nothing but a silent coup against the American people, and they're making it up as they go along. They don't want good, peaceful relationship with Russia. They needed Hillary Clinton to win so we can go to war with Russia. Wasn't this the decision? Wasn't this part of the plan?
So, anyhow, you know, of course, they're going to defend Trump. This is all part of smoking mirrors, and there's another guy, it was Brother Malcolm that brought him to my attention, who gets into this stuff even better than even alternative media television, and that is, I'm just going to try to get to it. He did one recently about, yeah, here we go, West to evacuate White helmets, voting machines, expose Gaza. So we're going to take a look at his video here, and I do apologize, the video still breaks up. This is the best I could do with old equipment, so I'm trying here.
Bringing you the most relevant, independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. Right now we're seeing efforts to keep the American people engrossed in the U.S. political theater, and they've never been so pronounced, so all-encompassing. It's reached a point where both sides of the false two-party deception have an almost evangelical cult-like mindset in regard to their party, and rely heavily on their manufactured emotional certainty. A certainty not based on facts and reason, but on emotional outrage and moral superiority. All of this serves only to keep the people so aggressively engaged in that which they see as the end-all be-all fight for humanity, but in reality it's just a ploy, another deception, used to do exactly what it's currently doing, distract you from everything they do not wish you to see, while forcing you to be hyper-focused, almost to the point of insanity, on very specific and never-ending discussion points. Russiagate, the deep state battle, both of which could very well be true, yet neither have any proof to actually justify the fervor. Yet both sides would deem even the utterance of such a statement as blasphemy, and give you a never-ending stream of conjecture and supposition presented as unequivocal fact, seeming to have forgotten altogether what that term actually means, as emotions win out over reason, which was the plan all along. So today I have 4 stories to cover that are all discussion points you'll likely not hear on mainstream media, as well as much of the independent media, yet are arguably some of the most important things happening today. But as always, don't trust me, come to your own conclusions. So I was recently sick for a couple of days, so I apologize for the absence. Again, one more quick apology for the 30 seconds of empty space in the beginning where I had my mic unplugged. That was my fault. I did a longer show this morning for about 2.5 hours. Really playing catch up on a lot of the different topics over the last couple of days. You know, the Trump-Putin summit, some of the things that I was, I had a lot of opinions about, but I was out for that, so I made sure to cover that all, over the last longer show. So for those of you that enjoy the longer streams, please make sure you check that out. Some really good stuff that was in there. A lot of interaction with the chat, which is more what I make sure and do for the longer shows, is engage with the chat and everything like that. But for this one, I have 4 stories that I want to cover that are all very important. And you already saw the image for the first one. Coming from Mint Press News, a very important story that we've talked about a lot, that I've done interviews with Eva Bartlett about, with Vanessa Beeley. A lot of different, there's a lot of content around this story, but this specific story, in my mind, it gives us an insight into some really interesting things here. Now, once again, the title is Western Governments Seek to Evacuate White Helmets from Syria, Resettle Them in Canada. Very, very interesting. Now, there's a lot of information around this story that stands out, a lot of it. But in particular, there's a few points that I really want to go over that I found to be very profound. But it's something that, in general, I think it's almost impossible for anyone to look at the facts, the actual facts, from people on the ground in Syria, from actual investigators that went there themselves, to actually seeing where the White Helmets work and what they actually accomplish. And the fact that they basically hijacked the name of the Syria Civil Defense and used it for themselves, and there's an actual real group with that name, it seems pretty clear what they really are. So following the recent success of the Syrian government's campaign to rid southern Syria of both radical jihadists and foreign influence, which they have done in a very
and I'll show you that
successful recently. The same Western governments that have long funded the White Helmets are now seeking to evacuate their assets, which that's what they are, and resettle them abroad, which is very, very interesting. And there's a lot, again, I'll wait to make my points here. According to a recent report, several Western countries that have provided funding for the group, such as the Netherlands, the UK, Germany, and France, are now scrambling to evacuate the estimated 1,000 White Helmets and their families, claiming that they are, quote, in danger of assassination and, quote, now in need of rescuing themselves. So the point I was about to make ahead of myself there. So if this is a genuine aid group, a legitimate group out there trying to save lives and help the Syrian people, why would they be in fear for their lives? I mean, of course, they're going to, oh, well, Assad's just this maniac murderer, and he will just kill anybody that's on their side, which is very patently false. I mean, very clearly untrue. With all the information we've seen, all the debunked, ridiculous, nonsensical lies that even the U.S. claims it has no proof to back up of gassing their own citizens, somehow now that Assad is taking back power, and this group that was supposedly, saving Syrian civilians is now somehow in fear for their lives? Doesn't seem to make sense. But what does make sense is that they're a radical jihadist group, because Assad is systematically taking out all the U.S.-backed extremist groups. So that makes sense. All of a sudden it makes sense. Now they're in fear for their lives because they're basically the little helpers of al-Nusra and al-Qaeda in Syria. And all of a sudden now they're in fear for their lives because Assad is winning. Very interesting. Now, obviously, that's not how the take is going to be from super, uber pro-statists, but the reality here is that this group is in fear for their lives because they are part of the enemy.
Yep, and that's just it, though, is, of course, we already know that they even tried to get Roger Waters of Pink Floyd to join them, and, of course, that Roger was going to say no to that. But while we got that, you constantly getting videos like this one here that shows that Assad, again, is liberating these places. But here we're seeing southern Syria. And of course, they're clearing out mines. They pretty much getting rid of the terrorist groups that America has always supported. See, America wasn't able to bring it down like they did with Iraq or Pakistan or Afghanistan or all these other places that they've tried to bring down. Syria, despite all the structure that's been destroyed, has pretty much remained intact, which is why Amalek is going to pretty much bring down Damascus, which is a prophecy of Isaiah. So, that's what's really going on. That's what they want to keep you distracted from. That's why they're always talking about Russian collusion and Russian hacking the elections and all that. We know it's all bullshit. What's really happening, though, is that the United States and Syria, pretty much what's happening, though, is that the only reason why there's going to be a so-called plan is because they're not ready to fight Russia. So... it'll look like it's de-escalating, but really, truly, though, again, this is the Valley of Yahweh, Shaphat, part of it, so is Yemen and everything else. And this war is just going to continue, because it is the Most High that is causing this war. So, again, looking at that, that's, and that's what they don't want to talk about, is the losing war on Syria. So they want you to think that Russia and America are all of a sudden, after all this, that they're, working together with Putin, and then of course the the other side of it, they're trying to act like, oh well, we don't want him to work with Putin, just pointless media coverage on it, and these were all distractions, and well, we got that going on. Of course, the Tiger forces, which is another part here, which is the main part of Assad's army, is pretty much getting closer to Golan Heights, which is occupy Jerusalem, which is the deep state, Amalek.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
played this one already. So either way, though, they've pretty much been clearing out these terrorist groups that are coming in through the Golan Heights, and so that's why they're trying to. Well, first they got to get the falsified white helmets out of there so they can doctor up another video at the other places that are keeping them safe, because of course they want to safeguard the white helmets because they're about to pull off another false flag. Russia's already warned about this, but while that's going on, I mean, we already know that Syria is just a target just simply because they are with Iran. Well, here's what's going on with the, sanctions against Iran.
The United States is preparing to reimpose a series of sanctions against Iran. They include a plan to bring down Iran's oil exports to zero. But signs have been emerging lately that show cutting off Iranian supplies to markets is easier said than done. That and more in this report.
On Monday, the United States made a surprise announcement that could suggest its efforts to bring down Iran's oil exports to zero are based on miscalculations, as Iran had earlier warned. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin was quoted by the media as saying that Washington would in certain cases consider waivers on sanctions that ban purchases of Iran's oil. Mnuchin added that the decision would be meant to avoid disruptions in markets. This is while other U.S. officials had emphasized that there would be no exemptions to the sanctions. Observers are now speculating that Mnuchin's remarks show that Washington is gradually becoming wary of the implications of cutting off Iran's oil exports to markets.
The challenge is to keep supply and demand balanced, but when you take the supply barrels, Iranian barrels out of the supply market, and the demand is there, how to replace them with the new barrels, and of course there is limited spare capacity around the world, and OPEC has already decided how to increase the production by its members. So the biggest challenge is for the United States to do that.
So anyhow, again, that's what you do when you're about to go to war, is you put sanctions on them, and eventually the countries fight. And we know that we're just about ready to get into the very last hour. So we'll look at this video here. It's about China, which is part of the trade wars leading to the market
China has warned that the world will fight back if the U.S. continues to be, quote, willful in its trade policies. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman said that Washington is fabricating all kinds of justifications for its trade actions. She stressed that the U.S. trade war has become the biggest confidence killer for the global economy. Washington has warned that it may ultimately impose tariffs on more than $500 billion worth of Chinese goods. That's almost the total amount of China's export to the U.S. The dispute has jolted global financial markets. Paul Rafona, when it comes to the way that Trump has pretty much exercised these tariffs on China, He believes that he has $500 billion to work with, an additional $200 billion in the works. But there are varying reports of how this is going to affect the U.S. itself, that there are going to be job losses. One particular report, very alarming, up to 450,000 jobs across some sectors. And Trump has come out and said there's going to be some pain, but at the end the U.S. is going to do okay. Do you agree with him?
Yeah, surely there is this risk because the economy, the global economy has been somewhat integrated over the past 20 years. So it's clear that imposing now barriers to the freedom of trade, this will also backslash in the countries like the United States that is imposing it. So there will be a transition period in which it is very possible that the US will suffer more what it will gain. The issue is the overall rebalancing of the world trade that President Trump wants to achieve, and it is a bit unclear at the moment how he wants to achieve this result. By putting barriers, he will restrict the trade and therefore have an immediate effect of losing himself too. Then in the future we have to see if there is another kind of an agreement to allow freedom of trade. For the time being is not visible.
And we just noticed what happened between Japan and the EU. We're looking at 30% of the world GDP there being wrapped up in a bilateral trade, as they call it. Do you think that eventually, given that China is such a huge market, that China is going to find other markets, particularly the EU, to increase its trade, to make up the void that exists now with the deficiency that is coming from the U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods?
This is very much possible. To a certain extent, it's already on the way. There is not such a bilateral agreement with China, but things may evolve towards that. So we have to see how much Europe will be able also to confront the United States on these issues, because of course for the time being the United States have still a capacity of harming the EU as such with a variety of means, from financial to others. So it is clear that from the Chinese point of view, Europe is a large market, probably even larger than the US, and may be a compensation measure to recover what they lose in the United States.
Thank you for that, Paulo Rafone, Secretary General of the Mississippi Foundation.
And with that, I'm going to leave with a few scriptures. Of course, we know that Moab is Esau's big trading partner, or big brother of the Holy Company, if you will. But you see, all that's coming down, and I'm going to read out of Revelation chapter 20, starting in verse 8. You know, Satan, which means deceiver, shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth. So he's going to deceive all nations. And how's he done this? He has done this with his lies, his diplomacies. He's done this, you know, and Satan is just another term for Esau, because that means adversary. Gog and Magog, to gather them to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. So, in other words, this is going to be a worldwide war. This is going to be the nuclear destruction that's coming to Babylon the Great and the rest of the world. And they went upon the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints. Camp of the saints. Who is that camp of the saints? Do we not call it Great Millstone Camp? Think about it. They're going to compass the camp of the saints. We already seen one motherfucker pull a gun out because he didn't like what we were saying, you know, telling him that, you know, this is about to happen. And the beloved city, which is, you know, we as a people, we are that city, Jerusalem. And fire came down from Yahweh out of heaven and devoured them. You know, what's it talking about? You know, fire from them ships, man, from the heavens, because that's like the elements. So fire came out of heaven to devour them. And the devil, that be Esau, that deceived them, was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and false prophet are, and they shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. In other words, this fire, the smoke of her burning, Babylon the Great, and the rest of the nations that were partakers in Babylon are going to be caught up in this. Especially if you take that RFID implant, you're going to be caught in this. This lake of fire, this final hour, you know, when Babylon the Great is destroyed, we're closely approaching that final hour. You know, of course the market's going to be pushed, but you can see where this trade war is going. You can see that the wars keep on intensifying, and that was the main focus on all this. So I hope this has been edifying. We're getting closer. This being the year of prophecy, and we're coming up on the 8th month. So that's like about 2/3 through, you know, already. So for that, I'm going to say shalom and brakazam to all you out there.